Well, let's go ahead and get started. Just to kick off, we like to do a little bit of housekeeping before I introduce our speakers today. So the controls for the webinar are located on the right-hand side of the panel. You'll notice a question or chat tabs as well. Feel free to type in your questions, and we hope to get as many as we can answered towards the end. And if you're having any issues, I do have our video producer, Andrew, here with me, and he'll be behind the scenes answering any of those questions that you might have in our chat tab. Yeah, everything is going to be recorded, and we will send it to you afterwards, so don't worry if you miss anything. It'll be all right there for you in your email. So let's go ahead and jump right in to introduce our speakers. So today we have Josh Cameron, who is the Chief Strategy Officer at Workforce.com, along with Rick Bell, who is our Editorial-in-Chief at Workforce Magazine, and they're going to be talking about how to fill difficult shifts as the economy opens up.
Awesome, thanks, Meg.
Yeah, welcome.
Let's jump right in. So just to kick us off, we're going to sort of try and work out why it's got so hard to fill shifts at the moment. We're hearing this pretty universally from everyone we're talking to in the market, and just even walking around Chicago, seeing signs everywhere. And what we're kind of seeing on the left here is apparently unemployment is still fairly high. It should be fine. It should still be easy to find people and fill roles. We're at about 6.6%. But this graph on the right here, I'm not sure if you guys can see my cursor. I don't think you can, but you can see we're really hitting an all-time high for the number of unfilled jobs. This is just in small businesses, but we think this is pretty similar across the board. This is higher than it's been even since way back when the Starter Series starts in 1973. So the number of small businesses out there looking for employees and not being able to fill those positions is pretty high. And I think that's really the pressure that we're seeing across the board. Everyone's noticing this, that it's just not very easy to find the right people to fill positions. What's making this hard? We've got a few theories on it. We're going to talk a bit more about them fairly quickly. But we're just on both the supply and demand side, we're seeing a lot of challenges and a lot of headwinds. So COVID concerns, I'm not going to talk too much about this one. Obviously, people are still concerned about coming back to work, particularly for frontline roles. And people sort of they aren't rushing to get back into work. And this is probably the more interesting one where we've sort of seen a change in demographics. And Rick and I were talking about this before the webinar, and we're seeing that this is workforce participation. So this is like what percentage of the people who could be working are actually making themselves available, applying for jobs, looking for jobs, or in the workforce. And you can see that the green dots are the 2020 figure. So that was even sort of as COVID was starting. It's not even sort of like just before things started changing. And you see there's been a pretty dramatic shift down, about 2 percentage points for both men and women. Rick, you had a few theories on that.
Yeah, I mean, we are seeing, I came across a statistic just yesterday that fewer women are in the workplace than ever before since 1980. I mean, we've also lost 275 million people from COVID and 570,000 in the United States. And so I think what we're seeing is we're starting to have this recovery, and the workforce is going to definitely have a recovery. What are some of the reasons that we have fewer women in the workplace? I mean, some of the theories could be, well, we had children out of school. Women also were in some of these hospitality positions, some of these typical hourly positions, and they were laid off. They felt the brunt of COVID and the pullback in the economy.
Yeah, I also have some theories around people probably stopped entering the workforce at the same rate. So people who were finishing college or finishing high school, there weren't jobs available right then. They may have sort of become a bit sort of disenfranchised with the idea of work. So I think there's a lot of things going on here, but certainly the childcare one was huge during COVID. And I think we're still seeing in Chicago that schools are only just starting to open up. They're doing things like different hours. There seems to be hundreds of school children around at 11 o'clock in the morning. So I think that this is not particularly helpful for getting women back in the workforce. So I think that's what we're seeing. I think we're going to see that remain low for at least a little while. Cool. The other aspect of it, and we don't want to get too into this one, but there is unemployment benefits that are higher than usual. And we're seeing people report that that's making it difficult to fill some roles. There's obviously a bit of an angle on that, but certainly would be a factor in some way, shape, or form. So we just wanted to point. This is a sign that sort of captured that sentiment that one of my colleagues took a picture of. So it seems like people who previously could fill roles are having more trouble than they used to. And whatever reason that is, this is definitely how some people are taking it. No one wants to work anymore.
Right. So Josh, going back to that, I think that the first part of that sign, we're short-staffed and basically we appreciate your patience. I think what we've seen too is that people who were laid off found other opportunities to go work. There's a really good example I came across. So in Atlanta, there are like 250 new real estate agents a month who are flooding Gwinnett County. And so you're seeing people who may have been in hospitality or in retail or in some sort of a service account industry or even manufacturing, who have found it's just like, you know what, I'm going to go find a different profession. And real estate clearly is one of them. I mean, we all see the boom around us, the real estate boom, and how expensive it is to buy a house, multiple offers on every listing almost. So it's like, it's not surprising that some of these jobs where they had to deal with customers on a regular basis who may not have always been the friendliest people, they've moved on. So it's not that surprising to see signs like that.
No, and I think Amazon Logistics, they've really sharpened their knives and sharpened their benefits, sharpened what they're offering employees. So leaving a job in like an Amazon logistics center to go work at Popeyes or a chicken shop or whatever it is again, it's probably not as attractive as what it used to be. Now people have tasted that. So certainly something that's going on. On the supply side, we've got back. I think we hit 200 million shots. I saw yesterday. So we've almost vaccinated half the country. Things are really opening up quick. I think we're really going to see this accelerate. It's just getting faster. See most things reduced, most things broken up. We're kind of getting pretty close to full swing. So everyone needs people all at once, all of a sudden, and that's where we're kind of seeing on the supply side. There's a lot more jobs out there, and people are doing some pretty huge recruitment drives to try and fill those roles. What impact is this having? So we wanted to focus this webinar more on filling like particular shifts rather than just filling particular roles. We thought that might be more interesting. We thought that might be more sort of specifically practical things we could do today. So we're seeing it much harder to fill some of these difficult shifts because we don't have enough people. And that's leading to people being upset when they can't get served quickly enough. It's leading to reduced revenue when we can't do all the work that there is to do. We can't fulfill all the orders or whatever it is. And what we're also seeing, and what I think is concerning for economists, is we could definitely see inflation, and we're going to see higher wages as we need to offer more to employees to get them to come back to work, and then those prices will need to be passed on to someone else. So this could all sort of play out over the next few months.
Right, and now one thing that you may see employers start to do, and I think it's a pretty smart way to pull yourself out of an economic slump, is that maybe you had a lot of part-time employees in the past. You've used part-time employees. And rather than having a whole lot of part-time employees, reduce the size of the staff and make them full-time. There's one fitness company in Minnesota that did just that. They are going to a smaller, more full-time staff. And it makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I saw, George, we've got some audio feedback. Andrew could probably look into that for us and see whose microphone that is. We'll try and work on that. Yeah, this is basically what I was saying before. There's probably no silver bullet for hiring more people in this environment. That's probably going to keep getting harder. But what we wanted to talk about today was more how we can work out how to staff people correctly and what techniques we can use to fill those difficult or unpopular shifts that are really hard to fill when you don't have enough people.
All right.
Oh, minions.
Yes. So for this, I was going to chat about a real life work experience I had, and this is more pertaining to overstaffing. So when I first started my career in HR, I was at a big box retailer, and we had a Starbucks in our store. So we were actually given through it was actually just like a payroll experiment, but we were given a lot of extra payroll hours, like probably double of what we would usually get each week to staff our Starbucks. And we weren't really strategic about it, but at the same time, we did have a lot of team members standing around not having a ton to do. So to make up for that, and this was just an experiment, we would have them walk around the store, hand out samples, try to do different things to bring more people to the Starbucks to increase sales, and it actually did work. So it wasn't really anything regarding to overstaffing and just not scheduling properly. It was an experiment, but it was really cool to see that the sales did increase, and we went from a red Starbucks to a green Starbucks when it came to sales. Yeah. Cool.
So this is really exactly what we're trying to get at here. I hope I fixed my microphone. Sounds a bit better to me. We want to really think hard about how many staff we need on. And I put a few examples down here because obviously we're talking to people across all industries. So some of these might apply to you, others won't. But if we're going to look at sort of how many people are walking past our store and try and use a number like that to work out how many people we need to have on. So this can get difficult and it can get hard, but the value of it is much harder than we think, and it's becoming more and more important because we can't just put unlimited people. We can't always have 5 people on because we don't have 5 people. So if we have that constraint, what can we do to make sure we have them on at the best possible time? So when we're busiest or when we really need them, or when the law says we need to have them on in certain other things. So some ways we can do this is mapping those out, like every 15 minutes being like, okay, this is how many people we need on at this particular time in this 15-minute increment from 9 to 9:15, and then using that to build our schedule around it. And this might be the sort of thing you can sort of get a long way with just doing it one time on one schedule, and see if you can get some of this data out, work with your operations people to sort of make it easier for your people who are doing the scheduling to do these type of things. You can come up with ratios that you use all the time. So it's like you might know whenever we're doing $100 of sales, we need 1 person on, and we need to ramp that up as we go. This can really sort of, instead of just thinking the only thing we can do is hire more people, it's also how can we use these people that we do have better and to serve customers better. That's really what this is about. We can talk a bit more about that later.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a real balancing act when you talk about understaffing versus overstaffing. It can be a difficult thing, but using some of your labor forecasting tools, being able to predict what, like you're saying, when your busy times, when your slow times are, it's not always best to go on gut instinct. I mean, you really need to have some data behind some of your decisions if you want to avoid overstaffing and understaffing, because Understaffing, what happens? It's like your customers are upset. Overstaffing, what happens? Your employees are upset because they're just standing around and they're not, if they're working in a restaurant, then they're not making the tips that they probably should. So it's really important to understand what the data has to say about when to do your staffing. So labor forecasting, to me, is one of those things that is almost an imperative these days.
Yeah, depending on your size and where your company's at, there's some pretty interesting things happening in machine learning to get better at forecasting this demand. So taking into account things like the weather or like historical trends that have happened, and that's probably some of the easier sort of machine learning type stuff to do. That's probably the most accurate, the most advanced. So if you're in a bigger organization, that's the sort of thing that you could be doing for your managers. So when they're building their schedule, they're looking at a really accurate prediction of how busy they're going to be. So that was one part of it. Like, okay, how can we make sure we're putting people on at the right times? The next part we want to talk about is what are some things we can do to fill those shifts where we know we're going to be busy, but no one wants to work anyway. So think on a Friday night, think late on a Sunday. That every business has shifts that no one particularly likes working. So how can we make this easier for people or give people incentives to actually fill those shifts? And this is particularly relevant when we are pulling from a much smaller pool than what we used to have. We used to have 20 people who could fill these shifts. Now, because we haven't been able to hire enough people yet, we're down to like 10 people. So what do we do to make sure that we can have people onto all these different shift types that we have that people might not want to go to? So the first thing, and we're seeing more and more of this, but it's something that's only come about probably in the last 5 years or so, is making it easy to broadcast when there is a shift available that's become available at the last minute to everyone. So we don't want to have to do a call around. We don't want to get our pen and paper out and call through 20 people to find someone to fill this shift. We want to be able to distribute that shift really quickly and really conveniently to everyone. So that's where technology can probably help, and it's one of the simpler, easier things to roll out and get happening. It's kind of relevant, this one. If that's going straight to their inbox, if it's going to somewhere where they can easily accept it, there's probably more chance that employees are going to pick those up. If it's doing things, one of the cool things that our product does is it tells the employee how much extra they're going to earn by taking that shift. So you're putting that money in front of them. They're seeing that, hey, okay, I can earn another $100 if I take this shift on Friday night. That's something that makes it more attractive for them. The other thing I see Amazon, I've got a picture of Amazon advertising. This is like, how can we make it more flexible for employees so we attract people who maybe have different, need different hours or want to work different hours? And Rick, you were mentioning that this is a good thing to mention to people when you are hiring.
Yeah, you need to be upfront. When you're hiring somebody, it's like, I'm hiring for a specific shift. So let's say in a retail environment, I need somebody to open my store on Saturday and Sunday mornings at 7 a.m. Not necessarily the most desirable shifts, but then again, some people may really want that. So you have to be upfront about it. And then once they're in the organization for several months, maybe they are able to move on to a different shift, a more lucrative shift. But being upfront in that hiring process is absolutely imperative. And know your employees' strengths. Well, and ask them, what do they want? I mean, that's part of the flexibility too. It's like making sure and asking them what they want and seeing if you can incorporate that, because maybe they do want some of those poorer shifts because it's easier for them to arrange childcare or it's easier for them to get to work. So be communicative and also be very upfront and transparent in the hiring process.
And then I had something to jump in about the being able to put the shifts up live for employees to pick up. If you aren't doing that, you don't have that technology, that means you're taking your leadership off of the sales floor, the restaurant floor, or they're not working with the team. They're back in the office calling people and trying to fill a shift. So, there are always people that want to pick up extra shifts. So I think if it does go directly to them, it's going to be much more efficient. And also you're not losing your leadership by having them in the back office dialing a list of 10, 15 employees to try to get them to cover a shift last minute.
Yeah, I was just looking at the results of that poll we did. I don't know if I hope everyone can see it, but it seems like as Lauren was sort of saying, the obvious solution to this problem seems to be just to pay higher wages, and that's what 50% of people are doing. And that probably, in some cases, that's going to need to be part of it. But thinking about how we can also reduce the friction for employees for working with us, things like flexible shifts and allowing more flexibility, I think it's a pretty good solution to that. I think in answer to your question, Lauren, I think advertising in places that you might not have thought of before, maybe college campuses, things like that, where people might be, the flexibility or the strangeness of the shift might be more attractive to them, is something I would probably try.
Also, there are a lot of Facebook pages for different industries where there are Facebook groups in different, in Chicago or different cities, and you can see a lot of their job ads getting posted there, and it's just a large community of people in that industry. So that shift will probably, even if it's not as desirable, it might fit someone's schedule and what they're looking for.
Yeah, cool. Jory, in terms of what is the average wage to hire someone on a second and third shift, I think that might be a good question for us to ask as a poll or after the thing, and we can probably provide some better data on that. I've certainly seen like 20, 15, 10 to 30% premiums be common. But I think that's probably a better question for us to throw out to everyone, just so you get some good data on that. And I'd like us to do some more research around that. Cool. Some of these last ones that I think it's more about sort of some different ways of doing incentives, and we saw a lot of people were sort of throwing incentives and increased wages in there. One that I quite like is, we call it dynamic shift incentives, or the idea of dynamic shift incentives. So we're changing it's not something like sort of Jory was suggesting there, where like this shift is always paid a 20% premium. It's something where the manager is sort of given some leeway to add an incentive to shifts that they know are going to be hard to fill, or they think are going to be hard to fill, and that the employee knows that when they accept that shift, that it's coming with this extra incentive. We've seen that security companies doing that a lot, and we've seen it happening a lot in the nursing industry to fill shifts that really need to be filled. And we think we're going to see that more and more, and we're quite interested in the optimization and how to get those incentives correct and the right level of them, and also how to bundle them. So should you just offer it on one shift, or is it better to sort of give people a block of shifts and say, yes, if you accept these 4 shifts this week, you will get this incentive. And we think that's probably the best way of doing that. But interested in feedback on that and the ideas around that. The other idea I heard from a hospitality group was that to sort of help retain employees, they would offer a signing bonus at the start, but it would be earned and paid at the end of the season. So this was on a ski field type situation. So they wanted people to stay the whole season. They didn't want them to leave it before the end of it. So they would sort of tell the employee they're going to get this signing bonus, but they would only get it if they're actually worked the whole season and did the shifts they were given. So that's really some of the cooler ideas we've seen around the place.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because another way, as far as recruiting goes, the number one way to recruit is through referrals. Employees referring friends, former colleagues, whoever, to come to work for you. And so by word of mouth, even within the organization, I think that's a really beneficial way to recruit and even retain people, because you can get people to, people may not know that these shifts are available. It's like what Meg was saying earlier, being able to have those shifts be disseminated either through an intranet or through some technology that the organization is using to communicate these shifts. And so, so through word of mouth, through internally being able to let people know that these opportunities are available.
Yeah, and I just had one thing to add, going back to retention for your employees that do have those non-desirable shifts. Something I learned from my own mistake is As HR professionals, you're always doing little things like cookouts, snacks, things to keep people engaged in an hourly sort of environment. So it's really key to make sure that even if you're not there overnight, that you are having everything set up for your overnight crew or your early morning crew, so they feel included in the team culture. Something little, but it does make a little bit of a difference.
Getting some great questions coming through here from Paula and Karen. I think this is definitely when we came out with this topic, this was definitely the sentiment we were picking up on in the market, and definitely what we wanted to try and do as much as we could to help with. But yeah, I don't think we have a silver bullet for attracting these people. We saw that Pizza Hut, I think we saw a story that they were doing a bulk drive-through hiring day.
Yep.
Where they were basically interviewing people in the car park like they were ordering a pizza. This is obviously a big challenge, and I think we're going to see some bigger dynamics change to make this all work. Like you're saying, Paula, like $2 per hour just isn't going to cut it. Yeah. Cool. We don't have a lot of time left, so I'll try and get to the end, and we can. I took this picture on the train this morning. Sorry, I missed the key part, but I think it's a pretty good example of the world when at every train station on my way in, there's signs saying benefits and flexible shifts. Like Amazon, they're not advertising a product; they're trying to advertise people to go work for them. So, and I also thought it was interesting the sort of things they're offering. So they seem to think that flexibility is a big point for people, and maybe that's working for them and something that we can try and have more of.
Signs at the train stops. It's just, that's how I got my insurance. That's how I got my car insurance. It's just like they're just the best.
Cool. So what we kind of want to do is we've got these people on this webinar. The whole idea of this is to try and share ideas and help people sort of bounce things off each other and see what's working for some people and not others. So we have put together an assessment. We've been really upping the quality and ability of these, and this one's a lot more automated, so it's going to give you your score right at the end, and hopefully offer you some more ideas, maybe some things you haven't thought of. And we'll keep working on this hiring issue. I think we're seeing that this is getting. It's just so relevant to the market at the moment, and with what all our clients and everyone we talk to is telling us about how hard this is. Like this hotel chain is basically saying that many hotels aren't reopening, not because people don't want to stay there, but because they just can't staff the people in there. So I think that's actually kind of sad, and it's definitely a problem, and it's something we want to try and help with as much as we can. So any ideas you do have, please add them into the survey and at the end there, and let us know, and we'll come back with those results for everyone, and we're interested to see what we can do. Do we have any other questions or anything else that we'd like to discuss? We've got some suggestions from Paula about the unemployment and stimulus. I think that's definitely an interesting one. I'm not sure if Joe's going to listen to us on that one, Paula, but definitely we are seeing similar things to what you're talking about. And I think we had it there that it looks like the unemployment is likely to continue to September. So I don't think we're going to see much change in this for at least a few months. Yeah, Gwen, I do feel for these people like trying to care for people, and we know those globally, those roles are always hard to fill. We've seen that all over the world, and I'm sure it's very difficult at the moment in those type of industries.
Awesome. Well, if we're kind of wrapping up here, I just want to thank everyone for attending today. All the questions are really great, and we really appreciate your participation. Also, we're coming out with new and relevant content each month, so just keep an eye out for future workforce webinars. So I think that wraps up for the day. Thanks again, and I hope you guys all have a great day.